Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another post-game live show. The Lakers fell 105-101 to drop to 23-13. They lost their first clutch game of the season and also their first single-digit game of the season. This was a tough one for LA. They rallied in the fourth quarter, entered the fourth. They were down 11 at halftime, down 9 going into the fourth quarter, and had an incredible start to the fourth. They go on a 15-4 run to take a 2-point lead, eventually extrapolated out to 4 points. And then right as crunch time hits, they hit a wall offensively. I'm going to go through the crunch time and break down where I think things went wrong, but lose their first clutch game of the season, are outscored 15-7 over the final 5 minutes of this game. And they are now 4-3 over their past 7 games, which has been post-Christmas. Last couple of weeks, the group has been sort of referencing like turning a new chapter post-Christmas, but they are now 4-3 with, I would say, the 3 losses coming against the 3 best teams they've faced. Milwaukee's technically under 500, but with Giannis in the lineup, they are now 14-10, which would be right there on pace with Philly and Toronto from a winning percentage perspective. So they're pretty much a top 6 team in the East with Giannis in the lineup. And so I would say, looking at who LA has played since the Houston loss on Christmas, they've lost to Detroit, they lost to San Antonio, which no LeBron, obviously we're very shorthanded in that one, and then the loss tonight. But shout out to the chat, shout out to the late night gang. Appreciate you guys tuning in on a Friday evening, a little bit later than normal, but your boy's still going through it. I was not at the game tonight. I thought I was going to be able to make it, but just not been able to shake this sickness, and feeling a little bit better tonight. So going to try to keep it around an hour, but you know that means I'm going to go almost 2. But shout out to the chat, shout out to everybody. Appreciate you guys. All right, let's get into it. So Buha's big picture is I want to break down the first clutch loss of the season, and I know, like, we have to start with Luka fouling out and that call, right? So upon review, I think that was not a foul. I think there was marginal contact at best. I think in the moment and with where the ref who called it was standing, I could see why it potentially looked like it. Like, I thought in the moment it looked like a foul, and I was in disbelief and was like, how did Luka just foul KPJ here on this possession? Upon seeing, like, from one vantage point, it's unclear just because you can't really see if their bodies hit or not. But from obviously the opposite view, you can see clearly that Luka does not make contact with him. I would say it was a flop on KPJ's part, but he got the call, it worked, and he fouled Luka out, and that was, that changed the way the Lakers' final possession went. It also was the 3rd time Luka has fouled out for his career. Sometimes that's just how a game goes, and I think the Lakers are, you guys know, as a general basketball rule for me, I try to avoid going at the refs or complaining about the refs. That's just not really, and this is not really how I view things. And then I also think in general, the Lakers do typically get the benefit of the whistle as much, if not more, than their opponent in a lot of situations. So I don't want to sit here and like try to, turn a certain narrative or whatever. But certainly it was a botched call, and I don't know if it ends up costing the Lakers the game. We don't know what. Like, it certainly led to the Lakers losing, but we don't know how the final 16 seconds go if that is not a foul. But certainly what was basically the game sealing possession there defensively. But I want to take a step back from even that. And like, how did the Lakers, sort of like in the superhero movie when they start, like, I bet you're wondering how we ended up here. How the Lakers ended up there, in my opinion, was just a bunch of bad offense down the stretch, a bunch of jumpers. I'm going to go through every possession, and I'll go through it relatively quickly, but I just want to see if you could sense some of the trends here. So Luka hits a fading away jumper right before the 5-minute mark. So that doesn't count for crunch time or clutch time, but the Lakers go up 94-90. They're up by 4 going into the clutch. Ryan Rollins gets downhill, wraparound pass for Bobby Portis for a layup. Next possession, Luka misses a pull-up jumper. Jackson gets a hand on it, but misses the tip in. Next possession, Dalton fouls Ryan Rollins. Rollins hits both free throws. Then both teams make subs. They bring back their starters, though Jackson closes the game over DA, plays the entire fourth quarter for the second time in 5 games. On the next possession, Miles Turner fouls LeBron. LeBron makes both free throws. Then Ryan Rollins misses a jumper. Bucks get the offensive rebound, but they get a shot clock violation. Lakers had some really good defensive possessions in that fourth quarter. Next possession, Luka misses a fadeaway. LeBron gets the offensive rebound, puts it back in. Next possession, AJ Green misses a 3. Then LeBron misses a jumper. LeBron then fouls Ryan Rollins. Rollins makes both free throws. Next possession, LeBron misses a 3. Then next possession, Giannis hits KPJ. He spins around LeBron, lays it up, or layup/dunk. Next possession, Luka misses a floater. Next possession, Miles Turner drains that corner 3. Jake LaRavia follows it up with a corner 3 of his own. Giannis misses a layup, but then on the next possession, he comes from behind LeBron and blocks his shot against the backboard. Then final possession, or basically final possession, Luka fouls KPJ on the 3. KPJ hits all 3 free throws. Then Lakers do not call a timeout, which JJ said post-game was a mistake, and that he had told the refs he wanted a timeout, whether it was make or miss after the KPJ free throws, and that he was kind of caught up in trying to just, he was also bringing, doing some subs or whatever. And like he was kind of caught up in the moment. He claimed that he yelled out timeout. The refs claimed they didn't hear it, and that's the 3rd time that this has happened this season. But I think in that case, you got to like run out onto the floor calling the timeout and just, you risk getting a tech there, but you got to call the timeout. But JJ does not call the timeout, and LeBron obviously gets the advantage downhill, but then Giannis pokes the ball loose from behind him, and that's the game. So in summation, LA's outscored 15-7 over the final 5 minutes of the game. And one of the clear trends here, again, Luka misses a pull-up jumper. Luka misses a fadeaway. LeBron misses a 3. LeBron misses a running jumper. Luka misses a floater. It was just a lot of jump shots down the stretch of this game. And then finally, when they get downhill, the last couple of possessions, it's LeBron gets blocked. LeBron gets the ball poked loose from behind him. So I thought it was just really poor execution offensively from LA. And I think they should be kicking themselves after this one with like how great that just closing the third with some momentum and then bringing that into the fourth. We've seen that group for weeks now, the LeBron-led bench group. It was Jackson, Vando, LeBron, Marcus, and Dalton. Dalton had some nice minutes, hit a couple of shots, or one jumper, one layup. That group crushed it and led that 15-4 run. And then the offense just stalled out from there, and they became very jump shot heavy, and they didn't make their jumpers, and they lost the game. But it was also a combination of fouling, I think, as well, where one of the trends here was, Dalton sends Rollins to the free throw line. LeBron sends Rollins to the free throw line. And then ultimately, Luka fouls KPJ. So more than half their points came at the free throw line down the stretch of this game. And that ultimately was the difference, where, in my opinion, like the Lakers were settling for contested or semi-contested jumpers. The Bucks were getting to the free throw line in part. Like they were winning a lot of the one-on-one matchups tonight. I thought it was better in the fourth, but through the first 3 quarters, they were shredding the Lakers off the dribble, and just that point of attack ISO defense was not there tonight for LA, and it's just one of the limitations with this roster, even with the Banshees playing a little bit more. But I think this is a learning lesson for LA from a clutch perspective, because they've been such a great execution team in the clutch. They nearly won this game despite trailing for a majority of it, and it would have been a really nice comeback win. Another, they would have continued the clutch time king moniker, being 14-0 in the clutch. But I think they got complacent and they settled, and they had a really rough stretch of offense to close this game, in addition to some nice defensive moments, but overall subpar defense, especially with sending them to the line too frequently. So that was my big picture takeaway, was like, I wouldn't say it was a disaster class, because they still had a chance to win this game. They were still within it in the final 30 seconds. Like, it wasn't like Milwaukee pulled away and then created distance with like 2 or 3 minutes left or anything like that. But it was certainly a situation where there was a lot of self-inflicted wounds, a lot of just sort of meh offense. And I thought that was the difference tonight. In terms of notable performers, we have to start with LeBron, who led LA in points, rebounds, and assists. 26 points, 9 rebounds, 10 assists, 3 steals, 3 turnovers, 10 for 21 shooting, 2 for 7 on threes, 4 for 6 at the free throw line. He was the only starter with a positive plus minus, and that was because of those bench groups that close the first and third, open the second and fourth. Those groups did great tonight, and again, had that monster run to open the fourth quarter. I thought LeBron, look, he gets blocked by Giannis. He gets the ball poke loose from him. That, at this stage of his career as a 41-year-old in year 23, I don't think LeBron is going to win the athleticism or physicality battle against Giannis. But I would love to have seen that in their primes. I would have loved to have seen, and of course, they overlapped. Giannis in the beginning of his career overlapped with LeBron's prime, but I would have loved to have seen, Heedle's LeBron, or that 2015 to 18 Cavs version of LeBron going up against this version of Giannis, and just what a heavyweight bout that would be from a pure physical specimen battle. But at 41 and with the height and athleticism gap that they have right now, it just, I expect Giannis to make plays like that. So I don't personally hold that against LeBron. He tried to get downhill. He did get the step on Giannis. Then Giannis was able to poke it loose. I think that is honestly more on JJ for not calling a timeout and not putting in a better offensive group, especially with no Luka out there. I get you maybe want to go to some sort of LeBron Jackson action, or picking on AJ Green wherever he's at, which is what had led to that, Jake LaRavia coming over to screen. But I think having Vando and Marcus out there, I don't know where you go, to be completely honest, because I don't know if you go to Dalton to close the game in that situation. Marcus had hit a few threes, Vando had hit a 3 earlier, but I do think you probably at least want to call, even if you keep the same personnel, because I've seen a lot of people hammering, you should have made a sub, you should have taken out Vando. Now, Vando could, the one thing with keeping Vando in is he did have a solid offensive night, 4 for 7, 9 points, 9 rebounds, including 4 offensive rebounds. So the one thing is, if you miss a shot, you have the threat of Vando, and he was very active in the paint as an offensive rebounder. But I think you had to call a timeout there and get the offense, especially with how the offense had been down the stretch. I think that was a really crucial missed opportunity from the coaching staff there. But overall, another really good performance from LeBron. This was his highest collective rebounds and assists in a while. I'm looking it up right now. You got to go back to the San Antonio game on December 10th, almost a month ago, when he had 15 rebounds and 8 assists. Otherwise, 19 combined rebounds and assists from him. And just some really big, especially during that run, some really big plays. Hit a 3, got downhill a couple times, had that putback, obviously, in crunch time. I just thought he did a really nice job of picking on Miles Turner, picking on Bobby Portis, also picking on AJ Green and KPJ, like operating out of the post, but also finding guys like beginning of the third quarter. LA comes out, runs a couple post up actions for LeBron on the right side of the floor, though technically he's on the left side if you're looking out from the paint, and he just sprays the ball out. A couple skip passes, one to Marcus, one to Jake. They both make them. LA goes on a quick 6-0 run to cut the lead down to 3, and then they're trading baskets for most of the third. Milwaukee pulls away late in the third, but then LA hits back with that run to open the fourth, and then it's close the rest of the way. Luka had, in my opinion, and I mean, look, I don't even take my word for it. Take Luka's word for it. He said he had a terrible day. So if we take Luka at face value, I think this was probably one of his 3 or 4 worst games of the season. I think the OKC game for me remains the worst performance of the season. And then probably that Clippers game before he got hurt. That one's also in the mix. But this one is in terms of a game he completed, this one is up, because even the OKC game, that was more like 3 quarters as well, because the Lakers pulled the plug midway through the third. This, like, in terms of a game he completed, this might be in the conversation for his worst performance of the season. An odd game from him, because it was like on the surface 24, 9 and 9. I mean, that's below his averages from a points perspective, but like 24, 9 and 9 is by no means a bad game. Couple steals. I actually thought defensively, I'm focusing more on the offense, because I actually thought defensively he had some really nice stretches, and if you want to factor that in, maybe this bumps it up from some of his. He hasn't had a lot of games like this, so that's where this one really stood out from an offensive perspective. But 8 for 25 from the floor, including going 4 for 6 on threes. So that was the wild thing, was Luka opens the game and hits his first 2 threes, and all of a sudden you're like, I mean, he's celebrating, like he does his celebration to the heavens, and it's sort of like Luka's not been making threes in the first quarter, or he's often not making his first couple threes. So to see him hit his first couple and to be hitting them consistently throughout the game, it was like, okay, Luka's on tonight. Like, Luka's shot is going to fall. Luka's in a certain rhythm, but he went 4 for 19 inside the arc, including all of those misses I referenced of, I believe he went 0 for 3 in crunch time, all on 2-point misses. And for a guy who's been basically a 60+% 2-point shooter all season, to go 4 for 19 inside the arc was pretty jarring. And then also missed, like, good turnover performance, only 3 turnovers for him, which with how much Luka handles the ball, you take 3 turnovers, 7 out of 7 days of the week. Also had 3 offensive rebounds, but 4 for 8 at the free throw line. He missed some, like, didn't get to the free throw line as much as normal, but also missed his free throws. And he was just really out of rhythm inside the arc in all facets, like literally inside the arc, with the 2-point shooting and the free throw shooting. And it just was a rough performance from him, where I thought he clearly was frustrated with the officiating. Like, most of the Lakers were frustrated with the officiating. JJ was frustrated. Marcus was frustrated. LeBron was frustrated. DA was frustrated. Jackson was frustrated. But with Luka, like, one thing we've talked about has been sometimes, like, because he's used to getting certain calls when guys are on his hip or guys are on his shoulder, when he doesn't get those consistently, and it'll be 1 out of every 4 or 5 games. I think sometimes he can let that take him out of a certain rhythm, where now he's almost trying to, like, I thought he started to look for, like, okay, you didn't call it on the last one, now I'm really gonna get the contact. And it worked a couple times, but it also didn't work several times, where all of a sudden now he's trying to initiate that contact and they don't call it again. And now he's flinging the shot up that doesn't have a real chance of going in. And I thought their physicality and their just not letting, like, all constantly being on his hip and being on his shoulder and just smacking and poking at him. I thought it brought him out of his rhythm, because when he didn't get some of those calls, it then becomes a thing with him and the defender and him and the ref, and it just sort of spiraled tonight. I mean, he eventually got some calls. It's funny to me because I feel like they started to almost give him some calls that, like, it was like he's getting hammered and they're not calling it, and then there'll be like a little touch thing and then they'll give him the call, and just the ref consistency tonight was pretty rough. I will acknowledge that, but I get why he was upset. I just think he has to do a better job of not letting that impact his game to the degree that it can at times. And like we have not, I mean, this has to be his worst 2-point shooting performance of the season easily, but this is not the only time we've seen him not getting calls sort of take him out of what he wants to do. And with how shorthanded the Lakers are right now, especially offensively, I don't think they could afford that tonight. So I thought that, I mean, just him not being able to score inside the arc consistently, what was a really big X factor against LA tonight. Then Jake LaRavia, 13 points, 5 of 8 shooting, 3 for 5 on threes, 2 points, 2 rebounds, 2 steals. I thought he was solid tonight. Would like to see more rebounds from him if he's going to play 34 minutes. He actually had the fewest rebounds among the starters, but did hit that big 3 in the corner with just over a minute left that tied the game at 101. And I think just continues to be solid and make a case to remain in the starting group once Rui seemingly returns on Monday. Marcus, 9 points, 3 for 9 shooting, 3 for 8 on threes. So like really the way that teams are defending the Lakers now is they're doubling inside the arc. They are sending 2 and 3 bodies at Luka and LeBron, forcing those guys to pass out, also shading over and sandwiching the big, and basically saying, Marcus, Jake, Vando, Gabe, you have to beat us. They've been doing this now for several games, like with no Rui, no Austin. LA is just really shorthanded in terms of offensive firepower and shooting right now beyond the big 2. And I thought, Marcus hit 3 threes, but it didn't feel great about them sometimes. And I feel like overall, I'm going to touch on the Banshees a little bit later, but right now I think they're in a little bit of a tough spot with, I think the defenses are tending to win that battle more often than not. Then DA, really disappointing performance again. I'm going to touch on him in one of my takeaways, but 4 points, 5 rebounds in 24 minutes, gets benched for the entire fourth quarter. Jackson plays, they literally split the minutes 24-24, but Jackson plays the final 12 minutes of the game. So I would even shift it from like an importance perspective. It felt like spiritually Jackson played more and had more of a mark on this game. He didn't have a great game by any means either. 6 points, 2 rebounds, but he just played with a certain it's just, again, DA's motor and the shoulder slumping and just missing. He had a couple of point blank looks that he missed. He had another couple of jumpers flashing into the lane that he missed that he's typically been making at like a 65% mark. Yeah, he's been missing a bunch of those lately. And then you're not seeing the same effort. Like I thought he held up reasonably well as the primary Giannis guy for the minutes he was out there. But it's just another rough performance from him. And this is the second time in 5 games he's been benched in the fourth quarter. And that's not a trend you want to be seeing near the midway point of the season. Jackson, as aforementioned, 6 points, 2 rebounds. Gabe, another, hit a nice 3 off of a flare screen and hit another wild 3 to beat the shot clock. But he continues to be a target for defenders off the dribble and in the post, and then also is just sort of chucking out there. And I think those minutes have not been good in the 2 shifts he's had since returning. DK led the bench in plus minus. Lakers are plus 10 in his 13 minutes. That was largely led by him being in that group that started the fourth. But I was happy to see JJ give him a longer leash in the fourth, and he so he had the one jumper where I believe he was going from like the right side to the left, kind of hit a free throw line-ish jumper, and then had the back cut where LeBron drives, is out of real estate, and then hits him with the behind the back pass for the finish over Portis. But like nothing crazy with Ayton. Ultimately, his line of 4 points, 2 for 4 shooting, missed both of his threes, 1 rebound, but just also didn't really screw up. Like I didn't think, like, didn't have a turnover, did have a foul late on Rollins, which JJ maybe left him in there a little bit too long going into like crunch time with him, but I was happy that he didn't pull him at like the 8-minute mark or the 7-minute mark. It was like, okay, give Dalton his run here, give him his opportunity. But he just like, he didn't stand out in a bad way, which I know that almost sounds like a backhanded compliment, but with how much he has often stood out in a bad way in the rotation minutes recently, I think this was progress from him and just a nice performance. And then Vando, 9 points, 9 rebounds, 4 for 7 shooting, continues to look more aggressive and assertive offensively. I think the finishing has been really encouraging the last few games. Like Vando, I think had been shooting under 60% at the rim as recently as a few games ago, which is bad for a big man, especially a big man that's like, should basically his role is either take open corner threes or take open shots around the rim. To be shooting 60%, or I mean under 60% on those is very bad, but he's been much better the last few games. And I think I've been just really impressed with Vando overall. Like he's going to have the games he goes 0 for 3 or 0 for 4 on threes, but that's not been happening often. You know, it's been once in a blue moon recently, and he's just been really, really solid. In terms of stat of the night, I'm going to go with -8 in crunch time. They were outscored 15-7, and that to me just really stood out just because LA they've been the clutch kings. And I thought once they won on that run and took the lead, I was like, there's no way they're losing this game. I really believe they were going to win the game. And that's how much confidence I've had in them. And like Milwaukee isn't the biggest test. They're not Denver or Houston or San Antonio or Detroit or one of those types of teams, but they are a solid team. So this was like we talked about recently, they haven't had a clutch game against a good team. I think this was a clutch game against a good team, and I think there are some learning lessons out of this one. And then final 3 takeaways. I'm going to rattle through these and then get into the Q&A. Takeaway number 1 is Jackson closes over DA again. So for the second time in 5 games, Jackson closed over DA, and I thought it was the right call. I do think Jackson, I don't love Jackson playing 12 straight minutes, and I think, I don't remember if he closed the third quarter. I'm going to quickly look. It looks like, yeah, no, Jackson played the final 17 minutes of the game. I think playing a player's 17 straight minutes is a little long, though that is in JJ's wheelhouse. He does like to do that sometimes. I would have liked to have seen DA give maybe a quick break from like the 6 to 4 minute mark of the game, see how he performs. Now, maybe with how he was playing, you know, the game spirals at that point or something. I don't know, but I would say I'm entering a concern territory with DA with his recent play, and certainly not having Austin, who he has really good chemistry with offensively, not having Rui, who's LA's best shooter and spacer, as like that weak side guy drawing a certain level of attention. That has impacted things. But looking at, like we talked, like the Christmas game was really disappointing. The Detroit game was really disappointing. Since that Detroit game, he's been under 30 minutes in 3 of the past 5 games. He's not closed 2 of the past 5 games, and single digit rebounds in 6 of the past 8 games. It's just like DA is not playing anywhere close to his best basketball. And I think, especially with who is out, you would think in a way like LA should or could run more of the offense through him or for him. And he's just been phased out of the offense basically, and has had one game with double-digit field goals in the past 9. So it's just not trending in the right direction with DA. And after the pouting and wanting the ball more, that has not really materialized in a real way. And outside of the New Orleans game and a little bit of the second Memphis game, and I just don't know where this is trending right now. Or I know where it's trending. I don't know where it's going to end up, though, is more so my point, because in terms of him being a long-term fit, in terms of his next contract, and in terms of the Lakers' needs at the trade deadline, I think there's a lot of open-ended questions right now. Takeaway number 2 is, so I think in general, the Banshees taking as many shots as they've been taking recently is a win for the defense. But I will note tonight, I thought tonight was like a reasonable blueprint of how it can go. They went, and for our purposes, I'm saying Jake, Marcus, Vando, and Gabe are the 4 like defensive perimeter guys that play. They went 9 for 21 on threes, 43%. They had half of LA's offensive rebounds, or just about half, 7 of the 15, and 4 of LA's 9 steals. So I thought like the Banshees collectively all played well tonight. Gabe, I guess, is the one that, that's the one that is a bit shaky. But Vando, Jake, and Marcus have I think all just earned bigger roles moving forward. And I think the way that the Lakers rotation looked pre-Austin and Rui injuries, I don't think it should go back to resembling that at all. And I think there's been some real big shifts here. I think officially it should be Jake or Marcus remaining in the starting group. I think Vando should be ahead of Gabe in the rotation. I've been saying Rui should come off the bench, but I think like it's pretty much undeniable at this point that should be happening. And I think they should be carving out a certain amount of minutes. Off the top of my head, I would say at least 70 minutes for those 3 players collectively. And that's not close to where they were pre-Rui and Austin going out. I think it was might have been closer to like 50 to 55. So I think there needs to be at least like a 15 to 20 minute increase. And that maybe it's a little bit less with the stars. Maybe LeBron, Luka, and Austin can finally have their minutes slashed. And that's like 2 to 3 minutes each. I think Rui should probably have his minutes come down from around 30-ish into the low to mid 20s. And then also Gabe should have his minutes come down a bit and him be more of like a 12 to 15 minute a night guy. So if you do all that, I think like the Banshees, I still have some concerns with the offense. And that was a point I made earlier in the show. It's a point I made last stream, where I don't think they are good enough or reliable enough as shooters or just offensively to trust in a playoff series yet. Like I think you can trust Jake and Marcus to a degree offensively, but I would like to see a couple more players added in. And I think specifically at the Gabe spot, that's the one to upgrade, of like a guy that you could just trust more offensively, is close to high 30s or 40% 3-point shooter, can attack a closeout consistently, make the right reads, make the right plays, and has a certain amount of speed and athleticism. Because I still think collectively with that group, Gabe, from a physicality perspective, Gabe is undersized. Vando's the most athletic, clearly, of the 4. But even then, I don't think he's quite as athletic as he used to be. Jake is big but slow. Marcus is also big and slow as a guard. So I think that they certainly need more speed and athleticism from those positions as well. And then takeaway number 3 is just a quick Rui injury update. JJ said he had a great workout today and that they are optimistic he'll play on Monday, but they still have to see how he fares over the weekend and how he feels on Monday. And no update on Austin, which, depending on how you view that, could be a good thing or a bad thing. But no notable update on Austin. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A here. First one from Justin. Thank you for the super chat. 8-9, last 17, going nowhere. Another lost season. I get why you're feeling that way. I don't think we're there yet. I think I want to see how the rest of this month goes and ultimately how the trade deadline goes. And trust me, we will have a very interesting show on February 5th or February 6th, depending on February 5th. They have a game that night. So that post-game reaction will be very interesting. They'll probably go live earlier in the day, like, through the deadline. I'll probably do another one like I did. I did the free agency live for the first 3 days of free agency. I'll probably do a deadline live as well. But then I will give you an answer, whether it's a lost season or where things are at. But like, the Lakers have certainly not been playing their best basketball. I think this recent stretch has been a microcosm of the season in terms of they have gone 4-3. They've technically been above 500 over this stretch, but the wins have been against all sub 500 teams. 2 of the losses were double-digit losses to above 500 teams. And then again, Milwaukee's technically below 500, but with Giannis, they're above 500. So I consider that one on the ledger. It'll go as a sub 500 loss, but I personally consider it as another above 500 loss. But I think this stretch here of 8 and 9 has exposed, like, if we're stretching it back to 8 and 9, now we're at, I mean, I guess you're going all the way back to like 50 after being 15-4 against New Orleans. And then it goes starting in December with the Phoenix loss, then the Toronto win, Boston loss, Philly win, Spurs loss, Phoenix win, Utah win, Clippers, Suns, Rockets losses, Sacramento, then this current stretch now. I don't know. I don't think they're going nowhere because we've only seen the big three's played in 8 games together. They're 5-3. Clearly the starting lineup isn't working, and like the fully healthy starting lineup has not worked. It's not going to work. They need to make a change there. But I would like to see this team with more of a sample size. Now, I still think they're probably the 5th best team in the West, and that's unfortunate because like they might be the 5th or 6th best. They're probably the 7th best. I would probably put them as the 5th best team in the West, 7th best team in the NBA, putting the 4 teams in the West I have above them, and then New York and Detroit. And so I would probably put them at 7th, but if they make the right move or the right couple of moves in the next month, if they can take advantage of a softer schedule, like they play Sacramento on Monday, that should be a win. They do have a back-to-back with Atlanta on Tuesday. Atlanta just blew out Denver, so that could be potentially a tougher than expected game, especially second night of a back-to-back. Then they play Charlotte on Thursday. Charlotte has been playing better. They blew out OKC. Then they have at Portland versus Toronto. Toronto second night of a back-to-back. Toronto's obviously a good team who they've already played close, and Portland they've already beaten the Lakers, but they have beaten OKC and San Antonio and Denver and Houston, and they're like the giant killers of the lottery teams. So that'll certainly be a tough game. But like on paper, I mean, if we're being honest, like they should beat Sacramento, they should beat Atlanta, they should beat Charlotte, they should beat Portland. Toronto's going to be a tough game. They're playing 5 games next week. That's pretty wild. Like between Monday to Sunday, they play 5 games. So that Toronto game will be pretty tough in terms of, actually look at this stretch. It's a little bit tougher than you would think because next week they play 5 games, which is wild. 5 games in 7 days, including 2 sets of back-to-backs. Then they follow that up by going on the Grammy trip, which is an 8-game trip, including they start in Denver, which they shouldn't have Jokic. So that should be a game that LA's favored in and should be able to win. But then they fly back to LA, then back out to Texas to go to Dallas, then Chicago, Cleveland, Washington, New York, Brooklyn. So that is an 8-game road trip that leads them into the deadline. So the schedule is sneakily like probably tougher than you would think, just based on an 8-game road trip is always difficult. There are no back-to-backs on that trip for them, fortunately. And you got the like New York, Brooklyn leg of the trip, which is technically just 4 days in New York. But yeah, I mean, I want to see how this stretch goes, and I want to see what they do at the deadline before I call it a lost season. Like, if we're purely judging them on like championship equity, sure, I think there are probably 6 teams I would put ahead of them, and you could even argue for Minnesota if you really wanted to make that case. But I don't think we're there yet. I want to see how the rest of the month goes and what happens at the deadline. Ryan Lucas, thank you for the super chat. Replacing DA should be priority 1B for LA by the deadline. So we talked about this on Lakers Collective, and my viewpoint is I still think the 5th starter spot, ideally someone better than Jake or Marcus, or someone better fitting than Jake or Marcus. Like if we're comparing them to those 2 players specifically, if it's comparing the player to Jake, I would want someone who's more athletic and a better shooter. And if you could find someone who brings some of those same intangibles, but is a better athlete, better shooter, then I think that's an upgrade. Or if we're comparing them to Marcus, I would want someone who's a little bit bigger, also quicker and more athletic, and also a more stable shooter and offensive threat. So easier said than done. That's like the most coveted thing on the market is always a 3-and-D wing. Every team could use an additional 3-and-D wing, even a starting level 3-and-D wing. If you have an army of them, you could just bring one of them off the bench. So like that's going to be the position that everyone's trying to get. We had the recent report that the Pelicans they're claiming they're not going to trade Herb Jones past this deadline. I'm a bit skeptical of that. I don't fully buy that. I think it's just they've not been happy with the offers that they're getting, and they're basically saying, if you don't meet our now they do have a high asking price. So if it really is like asking price or bust, it'll probably be bust. But in terms of the Lakers' priorities, I think priority 1A has to be that 5th starter who like rounds out the starting and closing lineup, where LA has like a locked in, here are our 5 guys. And if someone's in foul trouble or someone gets injured, okay, we could slide in Jake, we could slide in Marcus, we could slide in Vando, we could slide in Rui. Like, depends on who's out, context of the situation. But that is like number 1 for me by a mile. Number 2, though, I still would like another perimeter, like ideally, and I talked about this, I think a couple streams back, we're talking about like the ideal player archetypes. Like, I think I'd want a Herb Jones archetype in terms of like an all defense caliber starter, and then a Keon Ellis archetype off the bench in terms of a quicker speedster type, like backcourt defender, as added to the bench group. Now I'm coming more around to the center spot. I think the thing here though is if you go through the market of like who is out there, I mean, if we just do it quickly, right? Like you're not getting anyone from OKC. You're not getting anyone from San Antonio. You're not getting anyone from Denver. You're not getting anyone from Minnesota. You're not getting anyone from Houston. Phoenix, you might be able to get Nick Richards, but is Nick Richards better than DeAndre Ayton? No, he is not better than DeAndre Ayton. There's no one on Golden State better than DA. You're not getting anyone from Portland. You're not getting anyone from Memphis. You're not getting Zubats. Gafford is the most probably interesting name, but that would require Dallas to give up on the season, which they do have some incentive to because of their pick situation. And with this recent news that AD is going to be out for the foreseeable future, Kyrie is still out, and it could make some sense to just like Lively's out as well. It might make some sense to just be like, hey, it's not going to happen this season. Let's focus on giving Cooper as many reps as possible. Let's lose as many games as we can. And maybe that is helped by selling off on Gafford. But I think it's going to require something. It probably is going to require the first round pick. I don't see Dallas willingly trading with the Lakers, and I don't see Dallas being like, all right, we'll take Rui and Dalton in a second or something like that depending on the ultimate trade framework and math. But like that general framework of like Rui, Dalton in a second, you're not getting Gafford for something like that. Utah's not trading Kessler. Pelicans, I don't think the Lakers have enough to get Misi with 1 second unless they're giving up a first. And then Sacramento, there's not a center there. And then you go to the East. Okay, you're not getting anyone in Detroit. You're not getting anyone in Boston. You're not getting anyone in New York. Toronto, you're not getting anyone. Philly, you're not getting anyone. I mean, Drummond's interesting, but he's not better than Ayton. Miami, you're not getting anyone. Cleveland, you're not getting anyone. Orlando, you're not getting anyone. Atlanta could be a spot with Onyeka Okongwu, though he's another one that you're not getting Okongwu for a second round pick. I'll just say that. Like that's going to require a first round pick based on LA's current assets. Then Chicago, I would rather have Ayton than Vucevic. Milwaukee, they're looking to buy, not sell. Charlotte, Brooklyn, okay, maybe could you get Day'Ron Sharpe, but I don't know that. I think Ayton's better than Sharpe, but maybe that's closer than we think. If Sharpe gets more of an opportunity, I still would lean Ayton, and then you get to Washington and Indiana. So going through the center market, I don't know where this magical center is if it's not Daniel Gafford, and that would require Dallas to willingly trade with the Lakers, and the Lakers probably have to slightly overpay with at least a first round pick because they don't have. You're not using Dalton as like the primary trade asset. So yeah, the Lakers are in a tough spot in terms of finding because the point being is like, it has to be a starting center. You cannot replace DA with like, for as much as I totally understand all the frustration around DA right now, but he is still performing in the aggregate as a starting level center. So it needs to be someone at least on his level or better than him. And most of those players just aren't available, or the Lakers don't have the means to acquire them. That's more so my point here. Now, I guess this is the other name that I probably should have mentioned. We did mention it on Lakers Collective, would be Nick Claxton. That's the other guy. I would say it's Claxton and Gafford are probably the two guys that, and Okongwu, though, again, I think Okongwu's price is going to be higher than some fans might want it to be. I have mentioned this before, but the Lakers offered the Dalton package last year for multiple bigs. They offered it for Jalen Duren. They offered it for Walker Kessler. They offered it for Onyeka Okongwu, and all three of those teams rejected it. Now, in hindsight, Detroit was very smart to do that because Jalen Duren is now an all-star and potentially like a third-team All-NBA guy, depending on. I feel like some people might still do it by positions, but if you're not going by positions, I don't think he's a third-team All-NBA guy. Then Kessler, I'm still very high on that. That would be a dream target for me, but I don't think it's realistic in season. Maybe in the offseason if the Lakers make a competitive restricted free agency offer. And then Okongwu, I think his value's dropped since that time last year, but I don't think it's dropped to the point where Atlanta is just going to be like, we're giving up on this guy for DK in a second. Like I think the DK in a second pick that a lot of people have thrown around, I think that collective value is lower than people think it is. And again, they rejected DK in a first last year, so just think about that. But I really like Claxton, and I like that he's got a descending contract. He was my number 2 trade target last year behind Kessler. Lakers obviously went in a different direction, trading for Luka. So it's okay that they did not land Claxton, but he is someone that I'd be open to and think would really fit nice. Like there are some similarities between Claxton and Jackson that would make Claxton, I think, an awesome Luka partner, but he's much better defensively than Jackson and is also a better rebounder. Ron Lucas, Gigi Jackson, Claxton, Cam Thomas, home run deadline. So I've already been on record. I'm not a Cam Thomas guy, so I will not sign off on the Cam Thomas part of this trade. I also think Memphis is probably going to want a lot for Gigi relatively. Like I don't know. again, I think that's an example of, I don't think you get there with like Dalton in a second. I think you have to give up more than that. But if there's a way to get Claxton, I agree that would be a very successful deadline. The other thing here is I don't think you're adding the 3-and-D wing. That's not GG Jackson. I actually thought he had some good defensive stretches against the Lakers in that back-to-back set in LA, but he's not a starting 3-and-D wing. Trucker Star, thank you for the super chat. LA's intensity has been better, except DA, who has leapfrog Rui in the trade order. Heard Okongwu could be available at the deadline if Atlanta gets AD. Yes, I agree with everything you're saying here in terms of intensity has been better because I think they've been playing more intense players. And when you're playing Smart and Jake and Vando, those guys are bringing a certain amount of force and energy and intensity to lineups. And I think we've seen a real positive impact there, which is why I was just talking about those guys have to play 70 plus combined minutes moving forward. In terms of the last point, I think the clear complication here is that AD just got injured and might miss the rest of the season. So I don't see, unless Dallas is basically going to give up AD for almost free, or almost like attach like second round picks or something, like attach draft capital to get off of AD, even if it's like minimal draft capital, then I don't see why it would really make sense for Atlanta to trade for him now. And it might make more sense just to see like how he heals and maybe trade for him in the offseason. But yeah, I mean, it sounds like Okongwu is available. I just think, I mean, I would love to know what you guys think, but would you give up a first for Okongwu? Because I assume a lot of fans would think that's an overpay, but I don't think the Lakers are getting Okongwu for Dalton in a second. I think that would be selling incredibly low on him. And again, they already rejected Dalton in a first last year. So I don't think they're a fan of Dalton, I guess is my reading of the situation. So you got to like, I don't think Adu in a second is enough either. And Adu's injured and has been injured for almost the entirety of the past year. So I think that the Lakers are in a bit of a tough spot of like, if again, there's some separate moves of could you flip, something we've discussed has been like, could you flip maybe Rui to get a couple like 2 to 3 seconds and then use that in a different trade. But then now you're also, if you're looking at it from like a big picture perspective, you're not only giving up whatever you're giving up for Okongwu, but you're also giving up Rui, and like then that becomes a big loss to the rotation. So point being, I'm just going through like different scenarios here of why I think it's unrealistic to land Okongwu, but if they could do it, I'm all for it. I'm just skeptical of with their current assets that it's like Rui and the first are carrying a lot of the value right now, and if you're not giving up one of those, I think once you get into the Gabe, Maxey, and even I know because people have the funny thing is like people I know people have crapped on the Trae Young return, but like CJ McCollum is still pretty good, and especially if we're comparing McCollum and Kispert and those contracts to as expiring deals to Gabe and Maxey, like I do not think it's close. I CJ and Gabe, there's a big gap there, and I think Kispert and Gabe, there's also a notable gap there. So of course you're not trying to trade those guys for Trae Young, but my point is just that Atlanta at least got like, yes, they got expirings, but they got expirings who are like solid players, who are rotation players. I think you can make it like Maxey's not a rotation player, and I think you can make a case Gabe is arguably a fringe rotation guy. So part of that deal was like also wanting to remain competitive, add to their playoff push with the expirings that they got. So that's not every team that the Lakers are going to be trading with, but I'm just adding that in as like another layer to it of if a team is looking to remain competitive, like Atlanta seemingly is, and they're the team that just traded for those guys, I think just getting off of Okongwu's contract like wouldn't really make sense. Now, if you're throwing like, now maybe it's like DA and Dalton in a second and they're adding DA on, but maybe that's a different conversation. But yeah, I think it's, I think it's gonna be tough for them to add Okongwu. Kevin, thank you for the super chat. I think now Luka is worse than SGA. SGA gets a lot of ticky-tack fouls, but 70% of Luka's shot attempts is just to try to foul bait rather than actually score. I don't know what percent of his shots are foul baiting. I do agree to the extent of I think he does it too often, and I think it could take him out of rhythm, and I think it could take him out of his game. And there are plenty of games he's gotten 15, 17, 20 free throw attempts, so that approach clearly works. And I think Luka is good at getting downhill and drawing contact. I also think, though, there's a part somewhere maybe 20% of those. For me, it's more like 20 to 30% of those attempts of him trying, of him inside the arc on those little floaters and stuff, is him trying to initiate the contact or going into the guy. And I frankly think like a lot of those are no calls, or some of them are even offensive fouls, in my opinion. And I think sometimes he gets that call, and then I think in his head, he sort of is like, okay, well, that's the right call. That's a foul. And then when he doesn't get it, he gets infuriated with the refs. And it's like, well, actually, I think it's the right no call. I think it's not a foul. And, but I don't, compared to SGA, that's a bold claim. I don't know if I'll go that far, but certainly I think it's not every game, and it doesn't derail him all the time, because Luka has plenty of big performances where he's efficient inside the arc. He's making because sometimes he'll also make the shot. It doesn't even matter that he didn't get the call, right? But tonight was just a really off performance from him. Again, 4 for 19 inside the arc. Rich, thank you for super chat. I don't know how to assess this team with all the injuries. And I know you made that point recently, and we got into a little bit of a back and forth with that. It's fair. I also would just kind of flip the question of the point to this. Like, at this stage of the season, we're almost at the halfway point. Are you confident that the Lakers will be healthy at any point in the season? Because they had 2 games where they were healthy, and then all of a sudden Gabe goes down, and then eventually Austin goes down, Rui goes down, and they just can't. And then you have LeBron missing a back-to-back, and it's like they just can't stay healthy. And it's been that way all season. It's frankly been that way for multiple seasons in LA. And I don't know if you can have confidence in this group being healthy at any point. And I don't mean to sound like an alarmist or a pessimist. I'm trying to be a realist with the situation of they have been so injured that I think it would frankly be surprising and almost a miracle if they had a sustained stretch of the top 10 guys on this roster being healthy. Now, part of it is one of the guys came into the season injured and 41, and there's nothing the Lakers could do about that. There's nothing LeBron could do about that, right? He suffered the meniscus injury, and it seems like that played some part into him developing sciatica. Then he's also battling father time as a 41-year-old. That situation is what it is. He's got sciatica. He's got this foot arthritis. He's 41. We don't know when he's going to play back-to-backs. You just have to plan around that. But then you also look at some of the players on the roster, and it's like Vando's been pretty banged up the last few years. Smart has played 54 games the past 2 seasons. Gabe has been injured his entire tenure as a Laker. Some of these guys, it's like you kind of have to expect that. Then Austin has been a surprising one because he's been an Iron Man throughout his tenure with the Lakers. Rui's also been an Iron Man with his tenure with the Lakers. So like those two have been more on the surprising side. Luka's obviously been banged up at times too. So yeah, I mean, it's just been up and down the roster. Like really the only guys who haven't dealt with, I mean, even DA was banged up a little bit, but it's been like, I was going to say Jackson, but Jackson got banged up too. So it's really been Jake. Jake's been like the one guy who's been healthy and available all season. But I mean, I would say my opinion is sort of where it was at earlier in kind of going into the season, but even like early in the season where they're a really good offense. I think when fully healthy, this is going to be a top 5 offense. I also think it's probably a bottom 12, if not bottom 10 defense, and that's just not good enough. And they're probably somewhere between the 4th to 6th best team in the West. I would probably lean in the middle right now and say 5th, but yeah, I mean, they're going to have a tough matchup potentially in the first round, depending on what seed they are. And then, I think they're a team that looks like they could win a round maybe in the West, but I think to go to the next level, I think they have to make a trade. And I think we've seen that. And that's where the people who put their head in the sand and ignore like the net rating and point differential, it's like, again, right now looking at it, they are the one team. They're the only team in the playoffs in either conference right now with a negative point differential and net rating. And like that's not normal. That's not normal for a team this good on paper this late into the season. That is a bit concerning. So that they got to figure that out. Sarah, thank you for the super chat. A constructed roster should be able to absorb a subpar performance, 1 and 2 guys on any given night, but Lakers need everyone perfect to eke out wins. Yeah, I mean, and really, like if we're being completely honest, like they need the stars to be perfect, right? And that's where when Luka has an off night or LeBron has an off night or Austin has an off night, it's really glaring because it really affects the team. And they don't have the requisite, like again, that there's been some outliers where, all right, you get your Nick Smith 25, but even then in that game, like everyone was solid. So it wasn't like Nick Smith was picking up the slack necessarily, but I guess like the at Portland game where the guys go off, right? And there's been a few of these where they have this spirit, at Minnesota, they're without multiple stars or someone's not having a good night, someone else steps up. But for the most part, they basically need like 2 of the big 3 to be the 2 best players on the floor pretty much every game, especially against good teams. That's just really tough to do. That's just tough to do. But yeah, I mean, like, because I think there's a little bit of depth there in terms of, okay, if DA's having a bad night, you could go to Jackson and vice versa. With the Banshees, it's sort of like who's shooting the best, who's performing the best offensively, because they're all pretty, relatively stable and consistent on the defensive end. But yeah, certainly like, well, I think it's more so the stars, and that is a lot of pressure on the stars because the stars no star goes 82 for 82 or 65 for 65, however many games they end up playing. That's just not how, Jokic has off nights, Shea has off nights. Like it's how this goes. You need to be able to pick up the slack. But like the Lakers, if those 3 in particular are not firing on all cylinders, that's when they're like very beatable. And that's something that they have to figure out. Ooh to the wee, trying to ignite the chat with this one. Thank you for the super chat. How good would AR, Giannis, and Bron be? Just saying. That would be a really good trio. I think that I'm trying. So you'd really lean into the AR, Giannis pick and roll. And then you could also mix in though Bron Giannis pick and roll. You could also do inverted pick and roll there with Giannis handling the ball, LeBron screening for him, vice versa. Like you could go a multitude of ways. I think the key here to remember though is like there are certainly better. Like the Lakers have an interesting big 3 because I don't know if we've ever seen a big 3 with this collective level of playmaking and passing. Like I genuinely, I believe Luka and LeBron are the best passing duo of all time. And then I think Austin as like a 3rd best passer, as a guy who's consistently getting 7+ assists a night. But we see when he's the lead guy, he's getting 9-10 assists pretty consistently. I mean, that's again, you could probably go through NBA. There's probably a couple situations I'm forgetting throughout NBA history, but just with like Luka and LeBron as a pairing itself, I think that's the best passing duo we've ever seen in NBA history. And I don't think it's particularly close. But I think like to this point, there's less overall overlap. Like I think you could maybe run into some spacing things with Giannis and another center. For example, like I think you need the spacing center with Giannis. So like Giannis and DA, I think there would be some diminishing returns with that if LA kept it that way. Even Giannis and Jackson. But if we're just talking strictly a duo, I think splitting up, having 3 ball dominant, high usage guys who are best with the ball in their hands, you are still adding in a high usage player who's best with the ball in his hands, but he is a guy who can screen it. Like now you have 2 of your players, I think, can more naturally play off of the ball because LeBron has made that adjustment. Luka's been making the adjustment as well, but like we know Luka's at his best with the ball in his hands, and he's the best of the 3 with the ball in his hands. So, I think it more naturally sort of slots everybody into what they do best. But it would be another great one would be AR, Giannis, and Luka, or Luka, Giannis, and Bron, right? Like I think you could split up different variations of the big 3 and how they would fit together. Ali, thank you for the super chat. Would you trade for Onyeka Okongwu? Yes, I would. And I don't know his contract situation off the top of my head. He's obviously signed his extension, but I'm looking how many more years he's got left. So he's got 2 more years left. He's making 15 million, then 16.1, then 16.9. He's 25 years old. It's going to take him through his age 27 season. I think he's a borderline starter / like high level backup. So it's just like, what are you giving up for it? I don't think Rui is going to get it done. I don't think Dalton's getting it done. I don't think Adu's getting it done. Really, the only asset that I think LA could offer that would entice Atlanta is a first. And I feel iffy about that, especially if LA is actually willing to give up the first. I'd rather spend it on a wing personally and find the wing that's like a long-term fit. So, I think Okongwu would look great next to Luka, and Luka would feed him the easiest baskets of his career, and AR. But I'm kind of iffy on him as a long-term starter on a contender. I think he, again, depending on the lineup, I think like there are some situations he could start, probably more of like a high-level backup. But yeah, I don't know what the Lakers offer, because again, I don't think like Rui in a second is enough in my, like, unless they're simply looking to dump salary, which like it seems like they sort of are, but they still would like. He's had value to them, especially with Porzingis being out or, in and out of the lineup so frequently. I just don't know if that gets it done. Like, could you do something? Then it's like, do you flip DA, and is it like DA Dalton, or maybe like DA and Gabe, and then you get Okongwu. But now that's like 2. Now he has to start. It's either him or Jackson. And I don't know if you could get, I really like Mohamed Gay. If there was a way to add him into the deal, that would be something that I'd be interested in. But yeah, you almost certainly have to put the first on the table. And I don't know if I love that. Kevin, Wendell Carter's my dream center, one of the most switchable 5s in the league, can shoot 3s, play great defense, very good screener and roller. I really like Wendell Carter as well. He's just another guy or in another situation where I don't see why Orlando gives him up. He's got, so his extension or like new deal kicks in. Yeah, extension kicks in next year, and then he's making 18.1, 19.5, then 20.9 club option. This year he's only making 10.8. So you could offer Gabe or Maxey for him. It's just, he's the starting center on the Magic. I think the Magic, they've had it up and down season, but they're still in the mix. They're right now 8th or tied for 7th in the East and 2 games out of 4th. So I don't see why they give up their starting center unless LA is putting the first on the table. Baxter, thank you for the super chat. Jovan, what's your thoughts on a guy like Matisse Thybulle? I like Matisse. I think that he is so the complication here is that he's basically making the same as Gabe, and he's also an expiring. So I've done the whole, okay, well, if you offer Gabe or you offer Maxey for him, like really what's in it for Portland? He's already an expiring contract. So you're not enticing them with an expiring for, like, if he had one more year left, it might be like, okay, get off that year. Here's an expiring. Okay. Have some more flexibility. The Lakers can't offer them that. And again, the Lakers' second round pick is projected to be a pick likely in the 50s. So like there's a real drop off in second round value after like the mid to late 40s. And if you're offering a projected like bottom 10 second round pick, that's just not really moving. Like it's basically nothing. You're basically offering them, here's your chance to draft an international draft and stash prospect that will never come overseas, will never come over and play for you. Right. Like what does that do for them? So I just don't know what the offer would be. If there was an offer, I would be open to it. The other thing with Thybulle is like, he's another guy with the shooting that I don't know how much you can trust his shot. He does have an extensive recent injury history. This year he's only played 4 games. Last year he played 15. The year before he's at 6. Like he's been trending downward from a games perspective. But I mean, last year shot 44% on threes, which was a career best. The year before 35, year before 36. So he's somewhere around like a league average to slightly above average 3-point shooter, and then is a plus, clear plus perimeter defender, one of the better perimeter defenders in the league. But I view him, I'll say, like he's never been a full-time starter. His third season in Philly, he was close to a full-time starter. That's also how I view him. So I guess the two issues are I don't think he's the save as the 5th starter. I also don't know how they get him unless Portland's really high on Dalton or Adu. I just don't see it. Nala, thank you for the super chat. Sam Hauser would be so good on this team. Yes, a Sam Hauser would be great on this team if LA had a shooter. And that was more so the point I was trying to make with the last stream in terms of, I think we often think about the defense in terms of adding a defensive wing, but I think we can't overlook the potential value of that player being able to shoot the leather off the ball, and having an elite shooter like Hauser who can also hold up well defensively. Like he holds up in switches, he holds up in ISOs like reasonably well. That would be someone who would help this team a lot. So yeah. He played on the 2024 Celtics. So, JJ would like that. Champy, thank you for the super chat. If Luka isn't allowed to push off or charge, then he is completely useless as a player in playoffs. Refs swallow their whistle, and that's why he chokes. I would push back on this, and like Luka's playoff resume is pretty impressive, and he is I believe has the second highest playoff scoring average of all time, behind only Michael Jordan. And looking at his 4 playoff runs, he has averaged at least 30 points in 4 of the 5. His low was average 29 during that playoff run. But that was one of my points going back to even the Minnesota series. Was I was like, he obviously had the game 3 flu, food poisoning, whatever that was, performance. But like even with that, he still averaged 37 and 6 on 45% shooting, 53% on 2s, 35% on 3s. So I think Luka was more like, certainly has not been as efficient. If you want to go through like career 56% on 2s for the entirety of his career, he's at 54% in the playoffs. So that dips a little bit. Field goal percentage dips from 47% to 46%, but that is natural for, you're going to have more attention looking at his true shooting from 59% down to 57%. So like, yeah, there has been some dip in efficiency, but not like a major dip. And I think Luka's largely been an overachiever in the playoffs in terms of how his teams have fared, with certainly the exception of last year. But I don't think Luka's a playoff underachiever by any means, or that his losses are on him. He certainly has played a role in the finals loss and last year's loss. I'm not absolving him of any blame or criticism here. I'm just saying I wouldn't put him as the primary thing. I think the defense and overall performance could have been better against Boston. But what I will say to this is I think, to your point, I think he's got to find a way to not maybe be as reliant on, like, one thing that they keep bringing up on the broadcast is LA scores the second most points in the league, or second highest percentage of their points come from free throws. And even if that translates to the playoffs in terms of them being like the second highest free throw rate team in the playoffs, the overall free throws are going to go down. The pace is going to go down. And that's where I think they have to find a way to not be as reliant on that collectively. Certainly that applies to Luka. That also applies to Austin. But I think it's something like the team from a mentality perspective has to adjust. Gary Singh, thank you for the super chat. What's up with Luka? Was dominant to start the year. I would say, he's not been the same player since coming back from Slovenia, and I don't know if he's dealing with something, right? There was the report that he was dealing with something from, I forget where. I think it was sort of, we'll say, a random place, if I'm not mistaken. And then I believe Dan Wojcicki of The Athletic pushed back and said that that's not true. But if you look at his numbers pre and post that break, it's a tale of two halves of the season for him. But I think he's, look, this is coming off the Spurs game. And like, I know people are going to be on Luka, but I thought he was brilliant in the Spurs game. I thought that was one of his best performances of the season. So I don't want to be all doom and gloom with Luka. Like, he had one of his worst performances of the season. He owned it after the game. He said he was terrible. He said he needs to be better. I don't think he's going to have many more performances like this, if any more, in terms of at least going like 4 for 19 inside the arc. But yeah, he's not been the same player like that. That's played a part in LA not being the same team. But that also goes back to the earlier point I was making to Sarah's question. Like, LA is just so reliant on their stars being great, and that partly is roster construction. Like, they are very star reliant, and ideally they won't be as much moving forward after the deadline. Gary Singh, again, thank you for the super chat. Lakers got to close out better at the 3-point line, away from everybody. This has been an issue for the entirety of the JJ Redick era, so I don't know that this is going to change. The Lakers are, part of it's a lack of foot speed and athleticism. Part of it schematically. The Lakers want, and this is all, but this is also, it's athleticism and foot speed on multiple fronts, because it's the ability to actually like rotate and close out, rotate from, okay, you're the low man, no one else is in the vicinity. You have to go close out to the corner. How quickly can you get there? But then it's also lack of foot speed and athleticism in terms of keeping guys out of the paint, because part of the reason why the Lakers have such a conservative shell with their base defense is because they are not great at point of attack. They are not great at isolation defense. They are not great at corralling dribble penetration. So to make up for that, that's like going back to like the Minnesota series, the defense they tried to play against Ant is basically almost like a 1-2-2 zone, where you are zoning up at the two elbows and then the two blocks and then the primary guy at the top of the arc. So that causes them to be late on some closeouts. They also have some low motor players. They have some slow players, some unathletic players. So that collectively makes them not a good 3-point defense. And they also will, if there's a guy who JJ thinks is a bad shooter, the game plan will basically be don't guard the guy and just let him take as many threes as he wants, which hasn't backfired as much this season, but certainly backfired last season to a degree, but also has backfired at points of this season. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I do not like their 3-point defense. I do not like their approach on with their 3-point defense, but it seems to be the way that JJ prefers playing defense. So I don't know if that's going to change. Light him up. Thank you for the super chat. Why aren't more people talking about DA and trade packages? At least he's not a total negative value player in a trade with a low contract. Certainly possible. I agree with you. And it's certainly possible he is included in a potential trade. I think, to your point, I mean, he's not a total negative value player. He has clearly outperformed his value if we were talking about him being a free agent. At the same time, remember, when the Lakers signed him, there was a lot of pushback and skepticism. And like, there were a lot of people being like, hey, this is a great contract. It's a nice gamble. There were also a lot of people who are out on DA and have been out on DA since Phoenix, not even since when he got to Portland, but going back to the Phoenix days. So I think he's a very divisive player across the league. And even when he had the good start to the season, there were people I would talk to that would be like, just wait till the other shoe drops. Wait till he goes through a rough stretch and see how he responds to that. And those people, at least right now, are sort of being proven right. He's got over half the season to prove them wrong. But I mean, because I mean, the other thing here is like, if things really go off the rails and if he has a bad rest of the season, he could just opt in. And do you want, like, he's clearly shown he wants to start and play a certain amount and get a certain amount of touches. And do you want that kind of situation on your books? Like, I mean, two teams have now paid to, in various ways, to get him off of their team. So the Lakers would then be the third team. And like, if I'm that team accepting him, I'm like, I would hope then that he's probably opting out and going elsewhere in theory, depending on the situation. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible he could be included. I think the tricky thing is he probably has more value to the Lakers than he does to other teams. Unless it is, again, like if you're getting back Gafford or Claxton, that's a different story. But the Lakers got to be careful. You don't want to just dump him. I think that would be a mistake. And now you're recreating the 2025 playoffs and it's just Jackson or Jackson and like another vet minimum big. That I think would be a mistake. So I think like the list of like available centers or realistically available centers who are as good, if not better than DA and like in LA's price point from like a trade perspective, I think it's a pretty small list. And so it's certainly possible, but I don't think there's any way you could trade him without getting back a starting center. Nala, thank you for the super chat. Just as a heads up here, I'm going to go 5 more minutes until the 1:30 mark, and then I will be wrapping. Offensively, do you think Luka, Braun, and AR backcourt is the best makeup versus the physical ball pressuring teams? Well, do you mean... There's a couple ways to look at this. Like, do you mean as the starting group, as the closing group, like in general? Like, are you trying to build the ideal lineup against these types of teams? I think in general, I think all those matchups are kind of bad for all three of these guys. We've seen with Luka, when you have a certain amount of athleticism and physicality and you're able to pressure him and blitz him, you can force some turnovers. Like, I mean, he, if we just think about his highest turnover games, it's often some combination of it's been kind of like one of two things. It's either been teams that can blitz and trap him and double him, and then also make the rotation out to his safety, release valve pass, which is really hard to do. But like, Phoenix has been able to do that. OKC, Detroit, Houston, some of those teams have the athleticism to do it. Or it's been some of the teams that have been able to play the 2-on-2 and the drop, like Phoenix has also done. And then also, been able to stay home with the shooters. So then if Luka gets into a pinch and has to try to force a pass, they can create the turnovers there. Similar thing with Braun. When Braun deals with pressure, he can be susceptible to turnovers. He could turn the ball. I mean, sometimes LeBron will be like dribbling and someone will go pressure him and he'll just like immediately turn the ball over. Like he's had several of those where he dribbles it off his foot, he coughs it up. And then we know Austin has his history with the athletic backcourts that can pick his pocket. So I think the issue here is like, I don't think any of these guys are like, certainly it's different degrees where Luka, I think overall has fared the best. LeBron can take these guys in the post depending on the team and operate out of the post more. And Austin, I think has shown some progress with like he played well against Minnesota this season. He played well against Toronto. But then he also struggled against OKC. He struggled in one of the Phoenix games. I didn't think he played okay against Houston. I thought actually some of his minutes, especially in the second quarter, were the best LA's offense looked. But like Austin's obviously been up and down against these types of teams. So if it's a starting look, like these guys are going to start. I know some people want to split it up. It's not happening. So that just is what it is. Let's just say like San Antonio, that's an example of a team that could do this, that could give them some problems. So you're probably, I might honestly go Jackson at this point. I think Jackson, I might trust Jackson more in the matchups against these types of teams because I think I also think he's a better short roll passer and decision maker than DA. I think DA has gotten better at that as well. And DA can attack in like that middle of the floor range, but Jackson's a better lob finisher and just plays with a certain motor and force that I like. So I would probably go Jackson, Luka. I think I'm trying to think which Banshee you want out there. And I'm looking at this from like an offensive perspective. I mean, maybe Jake. I will say this. I would try to stagger the big three as much as possible and have some form of like two of the big three, a couple Banshees and a center. Like that's my general favorite framework. So I guess let's just go like Luka, Braun, Jake, Marcus, and Jackson. Let's say that. And then you stagger in Austin for one of those two, probably more so for Luka, and then Braun. I think that's maybe you bring in Vando or something, and then you bring in Austin for like you stagger it with the big three, I guess is my point. Emmy says, this summer, can the Lakers spend all the cap space they'll have and then re-sign Austin and LeBron? Technically, yes, but there are these things called cap holds. So LeBron and Austin will both have cap holds if LA wants to maintain their rights, which they will. So they'll still be counting against the cap to a degree. Now, Austin's cap hold, I believe, is like in the low 20s. So his cap hold's almost going to be half of what his eventual contract will be. So it makes a lot more sense to keep Austin on the cap hold. LeBron's cap hold actually might end up being bigger than his next contract, depending on what that ends up being. So LeBron is actually someone, it might make more sense to negotiate with LeBron earlier than letting that money sit on the books. But then to maximize the cap space, they're going to have everything settled in terms of DA and Rui and Gabe and Maxey. And again, we'll see if they trade those guys, what that looks like. But they're going to have those situations all settled relatively quickly. And then that will maximize the cap space. And then they can make those moves and then go into the first or even second apron, potentially, depending on what happens with Austin and LeBron. Constellaire says Austin isn't worth $50 million. Well, good news is that he's not getting $50 million. So it's going to be starting at probably somewhere between 38 to 42 million. For the people saying Austin isn't worth 40 or isn't worth 50, I'm curious, how much would you guys pay him? I got a super chat. Okay. Nala followed up here. I'll wrap on this. Nala, who always asks great, thoughtful X's and O's questions, says, meant more as creating a team to beat the ball pressure, physicality in the half court. I feel like these two playmakers are as good as it gets. Got it. So yes and no, because I think if we reverse this or look at it from a different perspective, I think like on paper, right? OKC, best defense in the league, has been one of the best relative defenses of all time in terms of comparing their defensive rating to the league average defensive rating. They have like fared as one of the historically best. They've looked like one of the historically best defenses ever. Which team has given OKC fits over the past month? San Antonio. And while there certainly is an element of like a certain level of passing from Fox and Castle and Harper and a certain level of playmaking, there's also a certain level of physicality and athleticism and speed. And I think part of San Antonio's success against OKC has just been straight up. They can look okay. They can look Kason Wallace in the face. They can look AJ Mitchell. They can look Shea. They can look Caruso. They can look Dort in the face and say, we're faster than you and we're more athletic than you. And we can be just as physical as you. And they've often won those one-on-one matchups in like that very way of De'Aaron Fox is blowing by them on the perimeter or creating space on the perimeter. So is Stephon Castle. So is Dylan Harper. So I actually think that like the one knock I would say is totally agree from like a basketball IQ passing. How should we structure the offense? Like the Luka, Braun, Austin trio is as good as it gets cerebrally and skill wise, but they don't have the athleticism and, just collective speed to, I think, punish these teams in the way that, like, because again, when you see the heavyweight teams fight each other, other than Denver, although they have some athletes in like Gordon and Brown and Peyton Watson and like those, like, I mean, they have their a certain level of athleticism within their offense, but it's like OKC and San Antonio and Houston, those are three like freakish athletic speedy teams. And I don't think Houston's at the same level as San Antonio offensively against like, they just don't have the guard play to that level. But I think it's like, I think you need to meet that type of defense, especially with teams now picking up, like think about the Indiana OKC matchup. Okay, like Halliburton isn't like a freak athlete, but he is like relatively quick and fast, and he has great stamina. He plays at a certain tempo he can play 40 minutes and basically be playing fast break basketball for close to 40 minutes. But they also didn't turn the ball over. And I guess like that's where you can maybe be a little bit less athletic or speedy against these teams if you take care of the ball. But that's where I think the Lakers' lack of athleticism really hurts them, is then they get pressured and they have droves of turnovers. And so you either have to be, I guess, like you either have to meet the physicality and speed with physicality and speed, which the Lakers currently cannot do with this roster, or you have to meet it with like pristine offensive play, high efficiency, low turnover. I think that's more like the Denver style or the Indiana last year style. That's why those two teams pushed OKC. The Lakers have not gotten to that level offensively yet. We've seen flashes of it. We've not seen it consistently. I think they can get there, but they need to get there sooner than later. They need to get Hull. They need to get Austin back. They need to get Rui back, and they need to start getting those reps. So that would be my closing thoughts on that. But appreciate you all. Shout out to the chat. I will be back on Monday after the Sacramento game. I'll also be back Monday for Lakers Collective. Appreciate you guys. And yeah, for those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back in a couple of days. Shout out to the Late Night Gang. Shout out to the chat. Peace.